Hey, what's going on everyone? This is Beck Brace. In this video, I'm going to explain to you what is RESTful API. First of all, the word itself, REST or RESTful. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. This is simply a programming architectural style that it's used to manage the state of resources on a web server using a predefined set of stateless operations. I know that sounds gibberish, but in easier terms or simpler terms, RESTful APIs allow systems to communicate over HTTP in a standard way. I'm pretty sure you know what is HTTP. Send a HTTP request and receiving HTTP response between the client and the server. So this is the standard way using the usual verbs, the get, post, put, delete, and other verbs. And that's basically to interact with those resources, typically formatted in JSON. Okay, it's represented in formats like JSON. Before it was represented in XML, but now JSON is more widely used. So that's it simply. It's a programming style that lets your system to communicate over HTTP, sending GET requests from the client to the server and receiving a response from the server to the client, posting, giving you the ability to update your data or to delete your data. And that's basically what has been applying in all of the CRUD applications. You know, the to-do list sort of application where you can create, read, update, and delete. Okay, so you do that via the RESTful API. I'm going to give you a practical example using Django Web Framework, but first let me show you some interesting diagrams just to illustrate more and understand more before we, get to coding part. I want to explain to you just a few things to make things clear for you. And for that, I'm going to use eraser.io. Eraser.io is an awesome tool you can use to build your diagrams. You can use to document your project. You can use both the document and the canvas. The canvas mainly is used to draw your diagrams and illustrate all of your ideas in very interesting visual way. So you can see here this bar on the left. There are a lot of shortcuts and options to choose from. So you have the V, and this is just the cursor itself. You have the R for the rectangle, O for circle, A for arrow, L for line, D to draw for free drawing, and T for text. All right, so what I want is just a circle. I'm going to put a circle like that. And inside that circle, I want to add a text here. And let me put a rectangle here. This rectangle will illustrate the client-server architecture. So the client-server architecture is one of the key principles of REST API or RESTful API. So the client, like your web browser, so if you will have here your client, let's say that I want a laptop or maybe Google Chrome, that's going to be your browser. It's the same thing. That's your client. This is your browser. And your backend, we're going to just illustrate that by server. So that's going to be a server, okay? So the relation between both of those, between the client and the server, must be independent, okay? They both should operate independently. So this is going to be, here we need to respect the independence. Why is that? Because if the client is going to send an HTTP request to the server should be aware of all of the data needed from or inside that request in order to respond with the proper response. So both of them should be independent from each other. All right, so that's the first principle. The second principle is statelessness. So as I mentioned before, the statelessness is a very important principle in RESTful API. So each HTTP request from a client to the server should contain all of the information the server needs to understand and respond to the request. And the server does not have to store any state about the client session. Okay, so that's one very important part of the statelessness between the client and the server, which means that the server does not have to hold a state of the client's sessions. Okay, let me just minimize the font a little bit here to make it small. Another principle of the RESTful API is the cacheability. And by cacheability here, I mean that the HTTP responses received from the server must define themselves as cacheable or not. Of course, it's better to be not cacheable to avoid, reusing the inappropriate data and cause problems. But yes, this is one very important principle of APIs. So we can say here the cacheability. Another important principle is the uniform interface. And by uniform interface, I mean that this is the method of communication between the client and the server. That means that it should use the standard HTTP methods. And finally, the layered system. And by the layered system, I mean that the client cannot ordinarily tell whether it's connected directly to the end server or to an intermediary along the way. All of the layers of communication between the server and, other resources should be totally abstracted from the client. The client should not know about that. So here, whether it's direct or by an intermediary connection, this should be totally abstracted from the client. All right, so there you go, guys. This is a quick illustration of the main key principles of RESTful API. Now let me go to my Visual Studio Code and create our Django project, where I'm going to demonstrate to you how can we create RESTful API in our Django project. So I hope you have your code editor open in front of you. You're sitting with your cup of coffee, warm and cozy, and code along with me. And at the end of the tutorial, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below, guys. Also, I appreciate all of the interactions and the suggestions. So yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and open our VS Code. All right, guys, so I'm going to create a RESTful API for managing a books resource. So let me just maximize this. So first of all, I want to activate my virtual environment via pipenv shell command. Okay, good. Now I want to install Django. And I will be installing the Django REST framework library. Now let's go ahead and create our project. So I'm going to do that via the following command. Django admin start project, and the name of the project. I'm going to call it simply my project. And I'm going to change the directory to my project. If you will take a look what we have inside our project, we have another folder called my project and manage.py. Now I'm going to use manage.py to create my books application. So you would do that simply by typing python manage.py start app, and the application I'm gonna simply call it books. Good. There are some configuration steps that I want to take. First, I want to go to my project, to the settings.py, and inside the installed apps, I want to add my books application. Then inside my books application, I will go to the models.py and I will define a model. Each model in Django, by the way, represents a database table. Okay, so we have from Django.db import models, that's fine. Now I need to create a class. So we're going to define a book model with the fields for the title, the author, the publication date, and the ISBN number. So that class, I'm going to call it book. And inside here, it's going to take models.model. Then I want the first field, the title. And that's going to be models.car field maximum length equal to 100. Also, I will need 3 more fields, or 4 more fields rather. I need the title, I need the author, and here I also will leave it to 100. This right here, it's going to be date field because that's going to be the published date. So that's a date field, not date time field, but date field rather. Now you can leave it empty inside, or you just can leave it to auto now add equal to true. I'm gonna leave it to empty. And we'll change the title to be published date. So that's the third field, and the fourth and last field is going to be the ISBN number. And that's naturally going to be less maximum length, not 100. We can make it to 13, for instance. All right. And then finally here, I want to return the title of the book when it's represented as a string. So I'm going to define stir function, taking self as input and returning self.title. So I'm not going to apply migrations yet. I will wait until I'm finished with the project, and then we'll do make migrations for the application, and we will migrate via manage.py. We can now do the serialization in the Django REST framework to convert some complex data types like query set, for instance, model instances, into native Python data types. We're going to create it by default. It's not included in our application. So I'm going to create that file. I'm going to call it serializers.py. So the first thing that I want to import here is the serializer. So from REST framework, framework, I want to import the serializers. There we go. All right. Next, I want to import the book class from the models.py. So we're going to say from the current directory models file, I want to import the book class. And then I will create this book serializers class, taking the serializers.model serializer. Serialization means that I want to create an ID number to the database. So this is simply what serialization means. I'm going to create a class called meta, and this is for our metadata. And the model here is going to be equal to book, naturally. And also I will need the fields. So we will need the ID, the title, the author, we will need the published date and the ISB number. So basically the ID number that's going to be added in the serializer plus the other fields we have created in models.py. So that's going to be fields. We don't need price. That's tab 9 playing with us. We don't need all that. I don't need the publisher. You can expand on this application if you want, but this is just a very simple example to show you how we can create a RESTful API in Django, as it's the most famous Python web framework. Plus the Django REST framework is very famous. I have received a lot of requests from you guys asking me to create a tutorial on Django REST framework. So there you go. All right, so we have the title, the author, the published date, and also we have the ISBN number. Except that should be a list, not a tuple. Now we want to create the views. So in books, in our books application, we have views.py. So inside views.py, we can define the views based on the MVT structure, the model view templates, the model, which is the database, the views, which we're going to create now, and the T, which is the templates, which is your HTML file. Basically, we use the Django template language to, render things on the screen. Now we are in the views phase. What I want to do is I want to use the DRF view sets, and the view sets abstract the logic of processing the requests and returning the responses. And that's awesome. This is one of the key principles. We said that we should not be bothered by, knowing what's going on when the request is sent from the client to the server, or when the response is being received from the server to the client, or did it pass to other layers, other resources. We shouldn't be bothered by that. So we're going to create simply our views, and that's it. So for now, what I want is from the REST framework, I want to import the view sets. Okay, the view sets. And then again, from .models, I want to import the book class. And from the serializers file, I want to import the book serializer class. Next, I want to define a view set that will automatically provides list, create, retrieve, update, and destroy actions, all of the CRUD router application verbs. So I'm going to create a class called bookViewSet, and it takes inside as main parameter view sets accessing the model view set. And inside my book view set, I want all of my book records to be available for API operations to perform upon. So I will declare a variable called query set, and that query set is going to be equal to book.objects.all. Simply put, I'm accessing the book class and requesting that all book records to be available for the API operations, and then storing this into a variable called query set inside our book view set class. Next, what I want is to specify the serializer to serialize and deserialize input. I might declare a variable called serializer_class, and that's going to be set to the book serializer main class that we have imported from our serializers file. And that's it for our views.py. Now you need to go to urls.py and import the book view set class. All right, so that's admin, that's the path. Now I want the routers. So from REST framework, I want to import the routers. The routers, of course, are used for routing, for changing pages. As we're not going to be using Django template language, we're not going to render anything. We can use Postman, you can use curl if you're working on Linux or Mac. Even if you don't use Linux or Mac, I'm going to show you a way to use curl inside Git Bash terminal. More on that later. Now I want to import the book view set. So from books.views, I want to import the book view set, and that's everything that we want to import. Next, I want to create a router. So that router is going to be equal to routers.defaultRouter. That's imported from the REST framework. Next, what I want to do is to register the book view set. So the way to do that is you will take the router and you will access a method called register. Inside register, you will have the books here, and the second parameter is going to be your views, the book view set class. All right, next inside here in URL patterns, we want to define the API endpoints. So I want to include all of the routes from the router in a URL path called API, for instance, or book API. By the way, I will need to import include. All right, from the Django URLs. So here I want path, and that's going to be API include router.urls. All right, so this is our setup. Maybe I can add a comment here, define the API endpoints and including the Django admin interface. All right, guys, and that's basically our application. Now let's go ahead and do the migration. So we want to apply migrations to create the database schema, and you will see that, so inside migrations, we don't have anything, but you will see now when we will do make migrations and migrate, there will be a file that's going to be generated here. So what you want to do simply is to type python manage.py make migrations and the name of our application, which is books. Okay, good. Now you can see that it has created for us a file called 0001_initial.py create model book, and it's inside here in migrations folder. If you will check that out, you can find here that this is what we have written inside our models, the title, the author, the publish date, and the ISBN number. The default database management system in Django is SQLite 3. All right, next I want to migrate. So I will do python manage.py migrate. the migration went successfully. You can find here that apply all migrations. What's most important for us is the books, our application. The admin, auth, content types, and sessions, it's just by default in Django. It's already included. So what I want to say is we haven't changed anything in that. This is what we have created. So, but what's most important for us is the books.111_initial. That's the application that we have created, and that's the file that actually has been auto-generated when we made the migrations. All right, perfect. Now let's go ahead and run our server. So I'm gonna say python manage.py run server. All right, perfect. So the development server has started working on the localhost port 8000. It doesn't matter really if you will open the browser or not, because we don't have any client interaction. You can use Postman to send and receive requests. I'm going to use curl. So one way to use curl, that's git bash, by the way. So that's the git bash terminal. All right, you can get it. Let me just show you very quickly. Git bash terminal. All right, if you will do git for Windows, you can get it from here. You can download that. All right, you will install it and you will have your terminal. Okay, and inside the terminal, by the way, you can do the curl, because in your PowerShell command line, it's not available. You can do curl. If you have Mac or Linux, it's by default, you have curl. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to perform some CRUD operations in a RESTful manner using the git bash terminal. Okay, let me just do like that. Maybe I can make like this. So I have created several commands. So the first one is to create a new book record, which is the create or post. Okay, so I'm going to paste that in. So what does it say? curl-x post on the localhost port 8000 route /API. That's the API route, and we have a books route. Then we have a header. That's the JSON format content type. And we have the data itself. So we have the title, author, the published date, and ISBN number. All right, I'm going to hit enter. And you can see here that we have actually added a record. So ID1, title, blah, blah, blah. This has been added. And you can see here that the post request went successfully. We can also retrieve data. So all of that is RESTful API. We are interacting using RESTful API. The requests sent from the client to the server accessing the resources. This is the RESTful API. Also, we can read from, the records that we have. So we have created a RESTful API represented in that ID, title, author, the published date, and the ISBN number. So all of the interaction between the client and the server, this is the RESTful API. This is what you're doing. All of those requests, the get, post, put, and delete, and there are more than those, but those four are the most common. So if you want to read or to get or to retrieve all the books, you will just simply do curl x get http localhost port 8000 API books. So all of the books you want to read. If you will hit enter, you can see here that we had sent a get request. So first we have sent a post request to register a record. Then we have a get request to retrieve all data. Get again, that's going to get again. I hit that by mistake. What I wanted to do actually is I wanted to create or post another record. So I'm going to paste that in. That's going to be it for Stephen King. You can see here, it's Stephen King, publishing date and ISBN number. And let's run that again. Okay, perfect. Now we have posted another record. If I want to get all of the books, so now I have two books actually, two records, right? The first one, which was the example, and the second one is the it book. Now, if I want to retrieve a book by its ID to target a specific book, I can add at the end of the route, at the end of the books route, the ID number. So if you would do like that, 2 for instance, hit enter. I apologize, I forgot the / after the 2. So we have retrieved the second book in our records. All right, now let's say that I want to modify the first record, this example book title. Okay, I want actually to enter a title for that book, the author, and so on and so on. So the way to do that is by using, of course, the verb put. So we have get, post, then put. So I'm going to paste that in here simply by saying here that curl put http localhost port 8000 API route books route and then the number of the ID of the book that I want to modify or update. And then simply I'm going to override the data for that record. So let's try that out. Great. So we have now the title, Life of Pi, author Jan Martel. That's the first record. If I want to retrieve the first book, and indeed we have updated the first book. So the last operation that I want to perform is a delete HTTP request. And to delete a specific book by its ID, we will simply, let me just paste that in. We will simply say here that we want to delete HTTP localhost port 8000 API books and the ID number of that book that I want to delete from the records. So suppose that we want to delete that Jan Martel book, or maybe I will delete the Stephen King book. Okay. Hit enter, and you can find here that it's a delete request from the API books, and we have HTTP 1.1204 status code. The 200 status code that you can find after the URL means that it's okay. The operation was successful. You have get data, you have modified data, all of that is okay, 200. 201 means that it's created. So this is an indication that the request has been fulfilled and a new resource has been created, in this case, a book record. So this is 201. And 204 means that there is no content, which simply means that the deletion operation was successful. Okay? There is no content for that record. Alright guys, so there you have it, RESTful APIs with a Django REST framework example. I hope this video was useful to you. If you found it useful, please don't forget to leave a like, share the video with your friends. I appreciate all of your questions and suggestions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.